Sal, The Pulse, Chapter 10. No time, Tom yelled and grabbed one of the high-backed, bogus Queen Anne chairs that flanked the lobby sofa. He ran it at the double doors with the legs up. The girl saw him coming and cringed away, raising both of her hands to protect her face. At the same instant, the man who had been chasing her appeared in front of the door. He was an enormous construction worker type with a slab of gut pushing out the front of his yellow t-shirt and a greasy salt and pepper ponytail bouncing up and down on the back of it. The chair legs hit the panes of glass in the double doors, the two legs on the left shattering through Atlantic Avenue Inn, and the two on the right through Boston's finest address. The ones on the right punched into the construction worker type's meaty, yellow-clad left shoulder just as he grabbed the girl by the neck. The underside of the chair's seat fetched up against the solid seam where the two doors met, and Tom McCourt went staggering backward, dazed. The construction worker guy was roaring out that speaking in tongues gibberish, and blood had begun to course down the freckled meat of his left biceps. The girl managed to pull free of him, but her feet tangled together and she went down in a heap, half on the sidewalk and half in the gutter, crying out in pain and fear. Clay was standing framed in one of the shattered glass door panels with no memory of crossing the room and only the vaguest one of raking the chair out of his way. "Hey, dickweed," he shouted, and was marginally encouraged when the big man's flood of crazy talk ceased for a moment and he froze in his tracks. "Yeah, you," Clay shouted, "I'm talking to you." And then, because it was the only thing he could think of, "I fucked your mama and she was one dry hump." The large maniac in the yellow shirt cried out something that sounded eerily like what Power Suit Woman had cried out just before meeting her end, eerily like Rast, and whirled back toward the building that had suddenly grown teeth and a voice and attacked him. Whatever he saw, it couldn't have been a grim, sweaty-faced man with a knife in his hand leaning out through a rectangular panel that had lately held glass, because Clay had to do no attacking at all. The man in the yellow shirt leaped onto the jutting blade of the butcher knife. The Swedish steel slid smoothly into the hanging sunburned wattle beneath his chin and released a red waterfall. It doused Clay's hand, amazingly hot, almost as hot as a freshly poured cup of coffee, it seemed, and he had to fight off an urge to pull away. Instead, he pushed forward, at last feeling the knife encounter resistance. It hesitated, but there was no buckle in that baby. It ripped through gristle and came out through the nape of the big man's neck. He fell forward. Clint couldn't hold him back with one arm, no way in hell. The guy had to go 260, maybe even 290. And for a moment leaned against the door like a drunk against a lamppost, brown eyes bulging, nicotine-stained tongue hanging from one corner of his mouth, neck spewing. Then his knees came unhinged and he went down. Clay held on to the handle of the knife and was amazed at how easily it came back out, much easier than pulling it back through the leather and reinforced particle board of the portfolio. With the lunatic down, he could see the girl again, one knee on the sidewalk and the other in the gutter, screaming through the curtain of her hair hanging across her face. "Honey," he said, "honey, don't," but she went on screaming. Chapter 11. Her name was Alice Maxwell. She could tell them that much. All she could tell them was that she and her mother had come from Boston on the train, from Boxford, she said, to do some shopping, a thing they often did on Wednesday, which she called her short day at the high school she attended. She said they'd gotten off the train at South Station and grabbed a cab. She said the cab driver had been wearing a blue turban. She said the blue turban was the last thing that she could remember until the bald desk clerk had finally unlocked the shattered double doors of the Atlantic Avenue Inn and let her in. Clay thought she remembered more. He based this on the way she began to tremble when Tom McCourt asked her if either she or her mother had been carrying a cell phone. She claimed not to remember, but Clay was sure one or both of them had been. Everyone did these days, it seemed. He was just the exception that proved the rule. And there was Tom, who might owe his life to the cat that had knocked his off the counter. They conversed with Alice. The conversation consisted for the most part of Clay asking questions, while the girl sat mutely, looking down at her scraped knees and shaking her head from time to time. In the hotel lobby. Clay and Tom had moved Franklin's body behind the reception desk, dismissing the bald clerk's loud and bizarre protests that, "You'll just be under my feet there." The clerk, who had given his name simply as Mr. Riccardi, had since retired to his inner office. Clay had followed him just long enough to ascertain that Mr. Riccardi had been telling the truth about the TV being out of commish, then left him there. Sharon Riddell would have said Mr. Riccardi was brooding in his tent. The man hadn't let Clay go without a parting shot, however. "Now we're open to the world," he said bitterly. "I hope you think you've accomplished something." "Mr. Riccardi," Clay said as patiently as he could, "I saw a plane crash land on the other side of Boston Common not an hour ago. It sounds like more planes, big ones, are doing the same thing at Logan. Maybe they're even making suicide runs on the terminals. There are explosions all over downtown. I'd say that this afternoon all of Boston is open to the world." As if to underline this point, a very heavy thump had come from above them. Mr. Riccardi didn't look up. He only flapped a begone hand in Clay's direction. With no TV to look at, he sat in his desk chair and looked severely at the wall. Chapter 12. Clay and Tom moved the two bogus Queen Anne chairs against the door, where their high backs did a pretty good job of filling the shattered frames that had once held glass. While Clay was sure that locking the hotel off from the street offered flimsy or outright false security, he thought that blocking the view from the street might be a good idea, and Tom had concurred. Once the chairs were in place, they lowered the sun blind over the lobby's main window. That dimmed the room considerably and sent faint prison bar shadows marching across the turkey red rug. With these things seen to, and Alice Maxwell's radically abridged tale told, Clay finally went to the telephone behind the desk. He glanced at his watch. It was 4:22 p.m., a perfectly logical time for it to be, except any ordinary sense of time seemed to have been canceled. It felt like hours since he'd seen the man biting the dog in the park. It also seemed like no time at all, but there was time, such as humans measured it anyway. And in Kent Pond, Sharon would surely be back by now at the house he still thought of as home. He needed to talk to her, to make sure she was all right, and tell her he was too, but those weren't the important things. Making sure Johnny was all right, that was important, but there was something even more important than that, vital, really. He didn't have a cell phone, and neither did Sharon. He was almost positive of that. She might have picked up one since they'd separated in April, he supposed, but they still lived in the same town. He saw her almost every day, and he thought if she'd picked one up, he would have known. For one thing, she would have given him the number, right? Right, but Johnny had one, little Johnny G, who wasn't so little anymore. 12 wasn't so little, and that was what he'd wanted for his last birthday. A red cell phone that played the theme music from his favorite TV program when it rang. Of course, he was forbidden to turn it on or even take it out of his backpack when he was in school, but school hours were over now. Also, Clay and Sharon actually encouraged him to take it, partly because of the separation. There might be emergencies or minor inconveniences, such as a missed bus. What Clay had to hang on was how Sharon had said she looked into Johnny's room lately, and more often than not see the cell lying forgotten on his desk or the windowsill beside his bed, off the charger and dead as dog shit. Still, the thought of John's red cell phone ticked away in his mind like a bomb. Clay touched the landline phone on the hotel desk, then withdrew his hand. Outside, something else exploded, but this was different. It was like hearing an artillery shell explode when you were well behind the lines. Don't make that assumption, he thought. Don't even assume there are lines. He looked across the lobby and saw Tom squatting beside Alice as she sat on the sofa. He was murmuring to her quietly, touching one of her loafers and looking up into her face. That was good. He was good. Clay was increasingly glad he'd run into Tom McCourt, or that Tom McCourt had run into him. The landlines were probably all right. The question was whether probably was good enough. He had a wife who was still sort of his responsibility, and when it came to his son, there was no sort of at all. Even thinking of Johnny was dangerous. Every time his mind turned to the boy, Clay felt a panic rat inside his mind, ready to burst free of the flimsy cage that held it and start gnawing anything he could get at with its sharp little teeth. If he could make sure Johnny and Sharon were okay, he could keep the rat in its cage and plan what to do next. But if he did something stupid, he wouldn't be able to help anyone. In fact, he would make things worse for the people here. He thought about this a little and then called the desk clerk's name. When there was no answer from the inner office, he called again. When there was still no answer, he said, "I know you hear me, Mr. Riccardi. If you make me come in there and get you, it'll annoy me. I might get annoyed enough to consider putting you out on the street." "You can't do that," Mr. Riccardi said in a tone of surly instruction. "You are a guest of the hotel." Clay thought of repeating what Clay had said to him while they were still outside. Things have changed. Something made him keep silent instead. "What?" Mr. Riccardi said at last, sounding more surly than ever. From overhead came a louder thump, as if someone had dropped a heavy piece of furniture. A bureau, maybe? This time even the girl looked up. Clay thought he heard a muffled shout, or maybe a howl of pain, but if so, there was no follow-up. What was on the second floor? Not a restaurant, he remembered being told by Mr. Riccardi himself when Clay checked in. That the hotel didn't have a restaurant, but the Metropolitan Cafe was right next door. Meeting rooms, he thought. I'm pretty sure it's meeting rooms with Indian names. "What?" Mr. Riccardi asked again. He sounded grouchier than ever. "Did you try to call anyone when all this started happening?" "Well, of course," Mr. Riccardi said. He came to the door between the inner office and the area behind the reception desk with its pigeonhole security monitors and its bank of computers. There he looked at Clay indignantly. "The fire alarms went off. I got them stopped. Doris said it was a wastebasket fire on the 3rd floor. And I called the fire department to tell them not to bother. The line was busy." "Busy? Can you imagine?" "You must have been very upset," Tom said. Mr. Riccardi looked mollified for the first time. "I called the police when things outside started, to go downhill." "Yes," Clay said. "To go downhill was one way of putting it, all right." "Did you get an answer?" "A man told me I'd have to clear the line and then hung up on me," Mr. Riccardi said. The indignation was creeping back into his voice. "When I called again, this was after the crazy man came out of the elevator and killed Franklin, a woman answered. She said..." Mr. Riccardi's voice had begun to quiver, and Clay saw the first tears running down the narrow defiles that marked the sides of the man's nose, and... "What?" Tom asked, in that same tone of mild sympathy. "What did she say, Mr. Riccardi?" "She said if Franklin was dead and the man who killed him had run away, then I didn't have a problem. It was she who advised me to lock myself in. She also told me to call the hotel's elevators to lobby level and shut them off, which I did." Clay and Tom exchanged a look that carried a wordless "good idea." Clay had a sudden vivid image of bugs trapped between a closed window and a screen, buzzing furiously but unable to get out. This picture had something to do with the thumps they'd heard coming from above them. He wondered briefly how long before the thumper or thumpers up there would find the stairs. Then she hung up on me. After that, I called my wife in Milton. "You got through to her," Clay said, wanting to be clear on this. "She was very frightened. She asked me to come home. I told her that I had been advised to stay inside with the doors locked. Advised by the police. I told her to do the same thing. Lock up and keep a, low profile. She begged me to come home. She said there had been gunshots on the street and an explosion a street over. She said she had seen a naked man running through the Benzicks' yard. The Benzicks lived next door to us." "Yes," Tom said mildly, soothingly even. Clay said nothing. He was a bit ashamed at how angry he'd been at Mr. Riccardi, but Tom had been angry too. "She said she believed the naked man might, she only said might, have been carrying the body of a, nude child, but possibly it was a doll. She begged me again to leave the hotel and come home." Clay had what he needed. The landlines were safe. Mr. Riccardi wasn't shocked, but not crazy. Clay put his hand on the telephone. Mr. Riccardi laid his hand over Clay's before Clay could pick up the receiver. Mr. Riccardi's fingers were long and pale and very cold. Mr. Riccardi wasn't done. Mr. Riccardi was on a roll. She called me a son of a bitch and hung up. I know she was angry with me, and of course I understand why. But the police told me to lock up and stay put. The police told me to keep off the streets. The police, the authorities. Clay nodded. The authorities, sure. Did you come by the T? Mr. Riccardi asked. I always use the T. It's just 2 blocks down the street. It's very convenient. It wouldn't be convenient this afternoon, Tom said. After what we just saw, you couldn't get me down there in a bet. Mr. Riccardi looked at Clay with mournful eagerness. You see? Clay nodded again. You're better off in here, he said, knowing that he meant to get home and see to his boy, Sharon too, of course, but mostly his boy, knowing he would let nothing stop him unless something absolutely did. It was like a weight in his mind that cast an actual shadow on his vision. Much better off. Then he picked up the phone and punched 9 for an outside line. He wasn't sure he'd get one, but he did. He dialed 1, then 207, the area code for all of Maine, and then 692, which was the prefix for Kent Pond and the surrounding towns. He had 3 of the last 4 numbers, almost to the house he still thought of as home, before the distinctive 3-tone interrupt. A recorded female voice followed. We're sorry, all circuits are busy. Please try your call again later. On the heels of this came a dial tone as some automated circuit disconnected him from Maine. That's where the robot voice had been coming from. Clay let the handset drop to the level of his shoulder as if it had grown very heavy. Then he put it back in the cradle. Chapter 13. Tom told him he was crazy to want to leave. For one thing, he pointed out they were relatively safe here in the Atlantic Avenue Inn, especially with the elevators locked down and lobby access from the stairwell blocked off. This they had done by piling boxes and suitcases from the luggage room in front of the door at the end of the short corridor behind the elevator banks. Even if someone of extraordinary strength were to push against that door from the other side, he'd only be able to shift the pile against the facing wall, creating a gap of maybe 6 inches, not enough to get through. For another, the tumult in the city beyond their little safe haven actually seemed to be increasing. There was a constant racket of conflicting alarms, shouts and screams and racing engines, and sometimes a panic tang of smoke, although the day's brisk breeze seemed to be carrying the worst of that away from them so far, Clay thought, but did not say aloud, at least not yet. He didn't want to frighten the girl any more than she already was. There were explosions that never seemed to come singly, but rather in spasms. One of those was so close that they all ducked, sure the front window would blow in. It didn't, but after that they moved to Mr. Riccardi's inner sanctum. The third reason Tom gave for thinking Clay was crazy to even think about leaving the marginal safety of the inn was that it was now 5:15. The day would be ending soon. He argued that trying to leave Boston in the dark would be madness. Just take a gander out there, he said, gesturing to Mr. Riccardi's little window, which looked out on Essex Street. Essex was crowded with abandoned cars. There was also at least one body, that of a young woman in jeans and a Red Sox sweatshirt. She lay face down on the sidewalk, both arms outstretched as if she had died, trying to swim. Veritek, her sweatshirt proclaimed. Do you think we're going to drive your car? If you do, you better think again. He's right, Mr. Riccardi said. He was sitting behind his desk with his arms once more folded across his narrow chest, a studying gloom. You're in the Tamworth Street parking garage. I doubt if you'd even succeed in securing your keys. Clay, who had already given his car up as a lost cause, opened his mouth to say he wasn't planning to drive, or at least to start with, when another thump came from overhead, this one heavy enough to make the ceiling shiver. It was accompanied by the faint but distinctive shiver jingle of breaking glass. Alice Maxwell, who was sitting in the chair across the desk from Mr. Riccardi, looked up nervously and then seemed to shrink further into herself. "What's up there?" Tom asked. "It's the Iroquois room directly overhead," Mr. Riccardi replied. "The largest of our 3 meeting rooms, and where we keep all of our supplies. Chairs, tables, audiovisual equipment." He paused. "And although we have no restaurant, we arrange for buffets and or cocktail parties if clients request such service." That last thump, he didn't finish. As far as Clay was concerned, he didn't need to. That last thump had been a trolley stacked high with glassware being upended on the floor of the Iroquois room, where numerous other trolleys and tables had already been tipped over by some madman who was rampaging back and forth up there, buzzing around on the second floor like a bug trapped between the window and the screen. Something without the wit to find a way out, something that could only run and break. Alice spoke up for the first time in nearly half an hour, and without prompting, for the first time they'd met her. "You said something about someone named Doris?" "Doris Gutierrez," Mr. Riccardi was nodding. "The head housekeeper, excellent employee, probably my best. She was on 3 the last time I heard from her." "Did she have—" Alice wouldn't say it. Instead, she made a gesture that had become almost as familiar to Clay as the index finger across the lips indicating shh. Alice put her right hand to the side of her face with the thumb close to her ear and the pinky in front of her mouth. "No," Mr. Riccardi said almost primly. "Employees have to leave them in their lockers while they're on the job. 1 violation gets them a reprimand, 2 and they can be fired. I tell them this when they're taken on." He lifted one thin shoulder in a half-shrug. "It's manager's policy, not mine." "Would she have gone down to the 2nd floor to investigate those sounds?" Alice asked. "Possibly," Mr. Riccardi said. "I have no way of knowing. I only know that I haven't heard from her since she reported the wastebasket fire out, and she hasn't answered her pages. I paged her twice." Clay didn't want to say, "You see, it isn't safe here either," right out loud. So he looked past Alice at Tom, trying to give him the basic idea with his eyes. Tom said, "How many people would you say are still upstairs?" "I have no way of knowing." "If you had to guess." "Not many. As far as the housekeeping staff goes, probably just Doris. The day crew leaves at 3, and the night crew doesn't come on until 6. Mr. Riccardi pressed his lips tightly together. "It's an economy gesture. One cannot say measure because it doesn't work. As for guests," he considered. "Afternoon is a slack time for us, very slack. Last night's guests have all checked out, of course. Checkout time at the Atlantic Inn is noon, and tonight's guests wouldn't be checking in until 4 o'clock or so, on an ordinary afternoon, which this most definitely is not. Guests staying several days are usually here on business, as I assume you were, Mr. Riddle." Clay nodded without bothering to correct Riccardi on his name. "At mid-afternoon, business people are usually out doing whatever it was that brought them to Boston. So you see, we have the place almost to ourselves." As if to contradict this, there came another thump from above them, more shattering glass, and a faint feral growl. They all looked up. "Clay, listen," Tom said. "If the guy up there finds the stairs, I don't know if these people are capable of thought, but judging by what we saw in the street," Clay said, "even calling them people might be wrong. I've got an idea that guy up there is more like a bug trapped between a window and a screen. A bug trapped like that might get out if it found a hole, and the guy up there might find the stairs, but if he does, I think it'll be by accident. And when he gets down and finds the door to the lobby blocked, he'll use the fire door to the alley," Mr. Riccardi said with what was for him eagerness. "We'll hear the alarm. It's rigged to ring when anyone pushes the bar, and we'll know he's gone. One less nut to worry about." Somewhere south of them, something big blew up, and they all cringed. Clay supposed he now knew what living in Beirut during the 1980s had been like. "I'm trying to make a point here," he said patiently. "I don't think so," Tom said. "You're going anyway, because you're worried about your wife and son. You're trying to persuade us because you want company." Clay blew out a frustrated breath. Sure. None of them replied. Me either, Clay said. I don't think things are going to get better in Boston, not for a while. They're going to get worse. If it was the cell phones. She tried to leave a message for Dad, Alice said. She spoke rapidly, as if wanting to make sure she got all the words out before the memory flew away. She just wanted to make sure he'd picked up the dry cleaning because she needed her yellow wool dress for her committee meeting, and I needed my extra for the away game on Saturday. This man in the cab, and then we crashed. She choked the man, and she bit the man, and his turban fell off, and there was blood on the side of his face, and we crashed. Alice looked around at their three staring faces, then put her own face into her hands and began to sob. Tom moved to comfort her, but Mr. Riccardi surprised Clay by coming around his desk and putting one pipe semi-arm around the girl before Tom could get to her. There, he said. I'm sure it was all a misunderstanding, young lady. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and wild. Misunderstanding? She indicated the dried bib of blood on the front of her dress. Does this look like a misunderstanding? I used the karate from the self-defense class I took in junior high. I used karate on my own mother. I broke her nose, I think. I'm sure. Alice shook her head rapidly, her hair flying. And still, if I hadn't been able to reach behind and get the door open, she would have killed you, Clay said flatly. She would have killed me, Alice agreed in a whisper. She didn't know who I was, my own mother. She looked from Clay to Tom. It was the cell phone, she said in that same whisper. It was the cell phones, all right. Chapter 14. So how many of the damn things are there in Boston, Clay asked. What's the market penetration? Given the large number of college students, I say it's gotta be huge, Mr. Riccardi replied. He had resumed his seat behind his desk and now looked a little more animated. Comforting the girl might have done it, or perhaps he was being asked a business-oriented question. Although it goes much further than affluent young people, of course. I read an article in Inc. only a month or two ago that claimed there's now as many cell phones in mainland China as there are people in America. If you make a call or take one, you get some kind of a subliminal message? I guess that makes you crazy. Sounds like science fiction, but I suppose 15 or 20 years ago, cell phones as they now exist would have seemed like science fiction to most people. I'm pretty sure it's something like that, Clay said. You can get enough of it to screw you up righteously, even if you even overhear a call. He was thinking of Pixie Dark, but the insidious thing is that when people see things going wrong all around them, their first impulse is to reach for their cell phones and try to find out what's causing it, Tom said. Yeah, Clay said, I saw people doing it. Tom looked at him bleakly. So did I. What all this has to do with you leaving the safety of the hotel, especially with dark coming on, I don't know, Mr. Riccardi said. As if in answer, there came another explosion. It was followed by half a dozen more, marching off to the southeast like the diminishing footsteps of a giant. From above them came another thud and a faint cry of rage. I don't think the crazy ones will have the brains to leave the city any more than that guy up there can find his way to the stairs, Clay said. For a moment he thought the look on Tom's face was shock, and then he realized it was something else, amazement maybe, and dawning hope. Oh, Christ, he said, and actually slapped the side of his face with one hand. They won't leave. I never thought of that. There might be something else, Alice said. She was biting her lip and looking down at her hands, which were working together in a restless knot. She forced herself to look up at Clay. It might actually be safer to go after dark. Why is that, Alice? If they can't see you, if you can get behind something, if you can hide, they forget about you almost right away. What makes you think that, honey? Because I hid from the man who was chasing me, she said in a low voice, the guy in the yellow shirt. This was just before I saw you. I hid in an alley, behind one of those dumpster thingies. I was scared because I thought there might not be any way back out if he came in after me, but it was all I could think of to do. I saw him standing at the mouth of the alley, looking around, walking around and around, walking the worry circle, my grandpa would say. And at first I thought he was playing with me, because he had to have seen me go in the alley. I was only a few feet ahead of him, just a few feet, almost close enough to grab. Alice began to tremble. But once I was in there, it was like, I don't know, out of sight, out of mind, Tom said. But if he was that close, why did you stop running? Because I couldn't anymore, Alice said. I just couldn't. My legs were like rubber, and I felt like I was going to shake myself apart from the inside. But it turned out I didn't have to run anyway. He walked the worry circle a few more times, muttering that crazy talk, and then just walked off. I could hardly believe it. I thought he had to be trying to fake me out. But at the same time, I knew he was too crazy for anything like that. She glanced briefly at Clay, then back down to her hands again. My problem was running into him again. I should have stuck with you guys the first time. I can be pretty stupid sometimes. You were scared, Clay began, and then the biggest explosion yet came from somewhere east of them, a deafening kerwham that made them all duck and cover their ears. They heard the window in the lobby shatter. My gosh, Mr. Riccardi said. His wild eyes underneath that bald head made him look to Clay like little orphan Annie's mentor, Daddy Warbucks. That might have been the new Shell superstation they put in over on Neeland, the one all the taxis and the duck boats used. It was the right direction. Clay had no idea if Riccardi was right, and he couldn't smell burning gasoline, at least not yet. But his visually trained mind's eye could see a triangle of city concrete, now burning like a propane torch in the lightning day. Can a modern city burn? He asked Tom. One made mostly of concrete and metal and glass. Could it burn the way Chicago did after Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over the lantern? That lantern-kicking business is nothing but an urban legend, Alice said. She was rubbing the back of her neck as if she were getting a bad headache. Mrs. Myers said so in American history. Sure it could, Tom said. Look what happened to the World Trade Center after those airlines hit it. Airlines full of jet fuel, Mr. Riccardi said pointedly. As if the bald desk clerk had conjured it, the smell of burning gasoline began to come to them, wafting through the shattered lobby windows and sliding beneath the door of the inner office like bad mojo. I guess you're on the nose about that Shell station, Tom remarked. Mr. Riccardi went to the door between his office and his lobby. He unlocked it and opened it. When what Clay could see of the lobby beyond, already looking deserted and gloomy and somehow irrelevant, Mr. Riccardi sniffed audibly, then closed the door and locked it again. Fainter already, he said. Wishful thinking, Clay said. Either that or your nose is getting used to the aroma. I think he might be right, Tom said. There's a good west wind out there, by which I mean the air is moving toward the ocean. And if what we just heard was the new stadium they put in on the corner of Neeland and Washington by the New England Medical Center. That's the one, all right, Mr. Riccardi said. His face registered glum satisfaction. Oh, the protests. The smart money fixed that, believe you, Tom overrode him. Then the hospital will be on fire by now, along with anybody left inside, of course. No, Alice said and put a hand over her mouth. I think yes. And the weighing center's next in line. The breeze may drop by full dark, but if it doesn't, anything east of the Mass Pike is apt to be so much toasted cheese by 10 p.m. We're west of there, Mr. Riccardi pointed out. Then we're safe enough, Clay said, at least from that one. He went to Mr. Riccardi's little window, stood on his toes, and peered out onto Essex Street. What do you see? Alice asked. Do you see people? No, yes, other side of the street. Is he one of the crazy ones? She asked. I can't tell, but Clay thought he was. It was the way he ran, and the jerking way he kept looking back over his shoulder. Once, just before he went around the corner and onto Lincoln Street, the guy almost ran into a fruit display in front of a grocery store. And although Clay couldn't hear him, he could see the man's lips moving. Now he's gone. No one else, Tom asked. Not at the moment, but there's smoke, Clay paused. Soot and ash, too. I can't tell how much. The wind's whipping it around. Okay, I'm convinced, Tom said. I've always been a slow learner, but never a no learner. The city's going to burn and nobody's going to stand pat but the crazy people. I think that's right, Clay said, and he didn't think this was true of just Boston. But for the time being, Boston was all he could bear to consider. In time, he might be able to widen his view, but not until he knew Johnny was safe. Or maybe the big picture was always going to be beyond him. He drew small pictures for a living, after all, but in spite of everything, the selfish fellow who lived like a limpet on the underside of his mind had time to send up a clear thought. It came in colors of blue and dark sparkling gold. Why did it have to happen today, of all days? Just after I finally made a solid strike? Can I come with you guys if you go? Alice asked. Sure, Clay said. He looked at the desk clerk. You can too, Mr. Riccardi. I shall stay at my post, Mr. Riccardi said. He spoke loftily, but before they shifted away from Clay's eyes, his eyes looked sick. I don't think you'll get in Dutch with the management for locking up and leaving under these circumstances, Tom said. He spoke in the gentle fashion Clay was so much coming to like. I shall stay at my post, he said again. Mr. Donnelly, the day manager, went out to make the afternoon deposit at the bank and left me in charge. If he comes back, perhaps then... Please, Mr. Riccardi, Alice said, staying here is no good. But Mr. Riccardi, who had once more crossed his arms over his thin chest, only shook his head. Chapter 15. They moved one of the Queen Anne chairs aside, and Mr. Riccardi unlocked the front doors for them. Clay looked out, and he could see no people moving in either direction, but it was hard to tell for sure because the air was now full of fine dark ash. It danced in the breeze like black snow. Come on, he said. They were only going next door to start with, to the Metropolitan Cafe. I'm going to relock the door and put the chair back in place, Mr. Riccardi said, but I'll be listening. If you run into people, if there are any more of those people hiding in the Metropolitan, for instance, and you have to retreat, just remember to shout, Mr. Riccardi, we need you. That way I'll know it's safe to open the door. Is that understood? Yes, Clay said. He squeezed Mr. Riccardi's thin shoulder. The desk clerk flinched, then stood firm, parentheses, although he showed no particular sign of pleasure at being so saluted, close parentheses. You're all right. I didn't think you were, but I was wrong. I hope I do my best, the bald man said stiffly. Just remember. We'll remember, Tom said. We'll be over there maybe 10 minutes. If anything goes wrong over here, you give me a shout. All right, but Clay didn't think he would. He didn't know why he thought that. It made no sense to think a man wouldn't give a shout to save himself if he was in trouble, but Clay did think it. Alice said, Please change your mind, Mr. Riccardi. It's not safe in Boston. You must know that by now. Mr. Riccardi only looked away, and Clay thought not without wonder. This is how a man looks when he's deciding that the risk of death is better than the risk of change. Come on, Clay said. Let's make some sandwiches while we still got electricity to see by. Some bottled water wouldn't hurt either, Tom said. Chapter 16. The electricity failed just as they were wrapping the last of their sandwiches in the Metropolitan Cafe's tidy, white-lined little kitchen. By then, Clay had tried 3 more times to get through to Maine, once to his old house, once to Kent Pond Elementary, where Sharon taught, and once to Joshua Chamberlain Middle School, which Johnny now attended. In no case did he get further than Maine's 207 area code. When the lights in the Metropolitan went out, Alice screamed in what at first seemed to Clay like total darkness. Then the emergency lights came on. Alice was not much comforted. She was clinging to Tom with one arm. In the other, she was brandishing the bread knife she'd used to cut the sandwiches with. Her eyes were wide and somehow flat. "Alice, put that knife down," Clay said, a little more harshly than he'd intended, "before you cut one of us with it. Or yourself," Tom said in that mild and soothing voice of his. His spectacles glinted in the glare of the emergency lights. She put it down, then promptly picked it up again. "I want it," she said. "I want to take it with me. You have one, Clay. I want one." "All right," he said, "but you don't have a belt. We'll have to make you one from a tablecloth. For now, just be careful." Half the sandwiches were roast beef and cheese, half ham and cheese. Alice had wrapped them in saran wrap. Under the cash register, Clay found a stack of sacks with "doggy bag" written on one side and "people bag" written on the other. He and Tom tumbled the sandwiches into a pair of these. Into a third bag they put 3 bottles of water. The tables had been made up for dinner service that was never going to happen. 2 or 3 had been tumbled over, but most stood perfect, with their glasses and silver shining in the hard light of the emergency boxes on the walls. Something about their calm orderliness hurt Clay's heart. The cleanliness of the folded napkins and the little electric lamps on each table, those were dark now, and he had an idea it might be a long time before the bulbs inside lit up again. He saw Alice and Tom gazing about with faces as unhappy as his felt, and a desire to cheer them up, almost manic in its urgency, came over him. He remembered a trick he used to do for his son. He wondered again about Johnny's cell phone, and the panic rat took another nip out of him. Clay hoped with all his heart the damn phone was lying forgotten under Johnny G's bed among the dust kitties with its battery flat. "Watch this carefully," he said, setting his bag of sandwiches aside. "And please note that at no time do my hands leave my wrists." He grasped the hanging skirt of a tablecloth. "It's hardly the time for parlor tricks," Tom said. "I want to see," Alice said. For the first time since they'd met her, there was a smile on her face. It was small, but it was there. "We need the tablecloth," Clay said. "It won't take a second. And besides, the lady wants to see." He turned to Alice. "But you have to say a magic word. Shazam will do." "Shazam," she said, and Clay pulled briskly with both hands. He hadn't done the trick in 2, maybe even 3 years, and it almost didn't work. And yet at the same time, his mistake, some small hesitation in the pull no doubt, actually added to the charm of the thing. Instead of staying where they were while the tablecloth magically disappeared from beneath them, all the place settings on the table moved about 4 inches to the right. The glass nearest to where Clay was standing actually wound up with its circular base half on and half off the table. Alice applauded, now laughing. Clay took a bow and held his hands out. "Can we go now, oh great vermicelli?" Tom asked. But even Tom was smiling. Clay could see his small teeth in the emergency lights. "As soon as I rig this," Clay said, "she can carry the knife on one side and a bag of sandwiches on the other. You can tote the water." He folded the tablecloth over into a triangle shape, then rolled it quickly onto a belt. He slipped a bag of sandwiches onto this by the bag's carrier handles, then put the tablecloth around the girl's slim waist, having to take a turn and a half and tie the knot in back to make the thing secure. He finished by sliding the serrated bread knife home on the right side. "Say, you're pretty handy," Tom said. "Handy's dandy," Clay said, and then something else blew up outside, close enough to shake the cafe. The glass that had been standing half on and half off the table lost its balance, tumbled to the floor, and shattered. The 3 of them looked at it. Clay thought to tell them he didn't believe in omens, but that would only make things worse. Besides, he did. Chapter 17. Clay had his reasons for wanting to go back to the Atlantic Avenue Inn before they set off. One was to retrieve his portfolio, which he'd left sitting in the lobby. Another was to see if they couldn't find some sort of makeshift scabbard for Alice's knife. He reckoned even a shaving kit would do if it was long enough. A third was to give Mr. Riccardi another chance to join them. He was surprised to find he wanted this even more than he wanted the forgotten portfolio of drawings. He had taken an odd, reluctant liking to the man. When he confessed this to Tom, Tom surprised him by nodding. "It's the way I feel about anchovies on pizza," he said. "I tell myself there's something disgusting about a combination of cheese, tomato sauce, and dead fish, but sometimes that shameful urge comes over me and I can't stand against it." A blizzard of black ash and soot was blowing up the street in between the buildings. Car alarms warbled, burglar alarms brayed, and fire alarms clanged. There seemed to be no heat in the air, but Clay could hear the crackle of fire to the south and east of them. The smell of burning was stronger, too. They heard voices shouting, but these were back toward the Common where Boylston Street widened. When they got next door to the Atlantic Avenue Inn, Tom helped Clay push one of the Queen Anne chairs away from one of the broken glass door panels. The lobby beyond was now a pool of gloom in which Mr. Riccardi's desk and the sofa were only darker shadows. If Clay hadn't already been in there, he would have had no idea what those shadows represented. Above the elevators, a single emergency light guttered, the box battery beneath it buzzing like a horsefly. "Mr. Riccardi?" Tom called. "Mr. Riccardi, we came back to see if you changed your mind." There was no reply. After a moment, Alice began carefully to knock out the glass teeth that still jutted from the window frame. "Mr. Riccardi," Tom called again, and when there was still no answer, he turned to Clay. "You're going in there, are you?" "Yes, to get my portfolio. It's got my drawings in it." "You don't have copies?" "Those are the originals," Clay said, as if this explained everything. To him it did. And besides, there was Mr. Riccardi. He'd said, "I'll be listening." "What a thumper from upstairs got him?" Tom asked. "If that had happened, I think we'd have heard him thumping around down here," Clay said. "For that matter, he would have come running at the sound of our voices, babbling like the guy who tried to carve us up back by the Common." "You don't know that," Alice said. She was gnawing at her lower lip. "It's way too early for you to think you know all the rules." Of course she was right, but they couldn't stand around out here discussing it. That was no good either. "I'll be careful," he said, and put a leg over the bottom of the window. It was narrow, but plenty wide enough for him to climb through. "I'll just poke my head into his office. If he's not there, I won't go hunting around for him like a chick in a horror movie. I'll just grab my portfolio and we'll boogie." "Keep yelling," Alice said. "Just say, 'I'm okay, I'm okay,' something like that the whole time." "All right, but if I stop yelling, just go. Don't come in after me." "Don't worry," she said, unsmiling. "I saw all those movies too. We've got Cinemax." Chapter 18. "I'm okay," Clay shouted, picking up his portfolio and then putting it down on the reception desk. Good to go, he thought, but not quite yet. He looked over his shoulder as he went around the desk and saw the one unblocked window glimmering, seeming to float in the thickening gloom, with two silhouettes cut into the day's last light. "I'm okay, still okay, just going to check his office now. Still okay, Clay." Tom's voice was alarmed, but for a moment Clay couldn't respond and set Tom's mind at rest. There was an overhead light fixture in the middle of the inner office's high ceiling. Mr. Riccardi was hanging from it by what looked like a drape cord. There was a white bag pulled down over his head. Clay thought it was the kind of plastic bag the hotel gave you to put your dirty laundry and dry cleaning in. "Clay, are you all right?" "Clay?" Alice sounded shrill, ready to be hysterical. "Okay," he heard himself say. His mouth seemed to be operating itself with no help from his brain. "Still right here." He was thinking of how Mr. Riccardi had looked when he said, "I shall stay at my post." The words had been lofty, but the eyes had been scared and somehow humble, the eyes of a small raccoon, driven into a corner of the garage by a large and angry dog. "I'm coming out now." He backed away as if Mr. Riccardi might slip his homemade drapecord noose and come after him the second he turned his back. He was suddenly more than afraid for Sharon and Johnny. He was homesick for them, with a depth of feeling that made him think of his first day at school, his mother leaving him at the playground gate The other parents had walked their kids in, but his mother said, "You just go in there, Clayton. It's the first room. You'll be fine. Boys should do this part alone." Before he did what she told him, he had watched her going away, back up Cedar Street, her blue coat. Now, standing here in the dark, he was renewing acquaintance with the knowledge that the second part of homesick was sick for a reason. Tom and Alice were fine, but he wanted the people he loved. Once he was around the reception desk, he faced the street and crossed the lobby. He got close enough to the long-broken windows to see the frightened faces of his new friends, then remembered he had forgotten his fucking portfolio again and had to go back. Reaching for it, he felt certain that Mr. Riccardi's hand would steal out of the gathering darkness behind the desk and close over his. That didn't happen, but from overhead came another of those thumps. Something still up there, something still blundering around in the dark. Something that had been human until 3 o'clock this afternoon. This time, when he was halfway to the door, the lobby's single battery-powered emergency light stuttered briefly, then went out. "That's a fire code violation," Clay thought. "I ought to report that." He handed out his portfolio. Tom took it. "Where is he?" Alice asked. "Wasn't he there?" "Dead," Clay said. It had crossed his mind to lie, but he didn't think he was capable. He was too shocked by what he had seen. How did a man hang himself? He didn't see how it was even possible. Suicide. Alice began to cry, and it occurred to Clay that she didn't know if it had been up to Mr. Riccardi. If it had been up to Mr. Riccardi, she'd probably be dead herself now. The thing was, he felt a little like crying himself because Mr. Riccardi had come around. Maybe most people did if they got the chance. From west of them, on the darkening street back toward the common, came a scream that seemed too great to have issued from human lungs. It sounded to Clay almost like the trumpeting of an elephant. There was no pain in it and no joy. There was only madness. Alice cringed against him, and he put an arm around her. The feel of her body was like the feel of an electrical wire with a strong current passing through it. "If we're going to get her out of here, let's do it," Tom said. "If we don't run into too much trouble, we should be able to get as far north as Malden and spend the night at my place." "That's a hell of a good idea," Clay said. Tom smiled cautiously. "You really think so?" "I really do. Who knows, maybe Officer Ashland's already there." "Who's Officer Ashland?" Alice asked. "A policeman we met back by the common," Tom said. "He, helped us out." The three of them were now walking east toward Atlantic Avenue, through the falling ash and the sound of alarms. "We won't see him, though. Clay's just trying to be funny." "Oh," she said. "I'm glad somebody's trying to be." Lying on the pavement by a litter barrel was a blue cell phone with a cracked casing. Alice kicked it into the gutter without breaking stride. "Good one," Clay said. Alice shrugged. 5 years of soccer," she said, and at that moment the streetlights came on, like a promise that all was not yet lost.